Do you store rice in your pantry or in your long-term food storage? Do you believe that rice really has a shelf life of 25 years or longer? And do you know the best way to store rice? And do you know the mistakes that people often make when they store rice? Rice is the most important staple food for a large part of the world's human population. It provides more than 1/5 of the calories consumed worldwide by humans. And it's an excellent addition to home food storage because it's inexpensive. This 10-pound bag of parboiled rice at Sam's Club cost me only $6.56. I mean, it's really a great bargain. Did you know there are over 40,000 varieties of rice in the world? But when I think of rice, I think of only two main classifications: white rice and brown rice. Well, and wild rice. But wild rice isn't really rice, so we aren't going to be talking about that today. Now, raw rice has three layers: the outer hull, the bran, and the kernel. Both brown and white rice have the hull removed, but white rice also has the bran layer removed, and brown rice keeps it, which is what makes brown rice usually more nutritious because it has the nutrition in that bran layer. However, that bran layer also has some oils, and over time, those oils can become rancid, so brown rice, not a good alternative for long-term storage. Now with white rice, the United States kind of further classifies it into long grain, medium grain, and short grain. You know, when you think of short grain, think of a little stickier rice, sushi rice. And I guess there is one more type of rice, and that is minute rice or quick rice. It's rice that's been dehydrated and it'll cook up fast for your evening meal. But again, that's not the best food storage rice. Oh, and two more things. Rice can actually be enriched or parboiled. And what that means is nutrients that were robbed from it when the bran layer was taken away, some of those are put back into the white rice. In this case, this is parboiled rice. And this is soaked in water and steamed in intensive pressure before it's actually milled and the bran layer removed. So some of those nutrients still go in to the white rice. So what rice is best for long term? Obviously not the minute rice or the brown rice. So it is white rice. Is there any type of white rice that is better? You know, you can do whatever white rice you want, but I think your best bet is the parboiled white rice because of the added nutrition. Let's look into that a little further. Parboiled white rice is lower in calories, lower in carbohydrates, higher in proteins, and higher in fiber than regular white rice. In fact, it is better for diabetics because it doesn't affect the blood sugar as much. And if you make up the rice and then put it in the refrigerator overnight, it will have even less of an effect on a person's blood sugar. Now, according to WebMD, a cup serving of parboiled long grain white rice contains 194 calories, 0.5 grams of fat, 41 grams of carbohydrates, 1 gram of fiber, 5 grams of protein, and is a source of iron and calcium. So, this is my selection. Now you should figure out how much to store. According to Utah State University's, families should store about 300 pounds of grain per person, and that includes rice. But is that right? Is that what you should use when you're calculating how much rice to store for your family? You need to ask yourself some questions first. How long are you storing it for? Is it 4 weeks or is it 4 years or 14 years? That makes a difference how much rice you're going to need. Are you only storing rice in an emergency and that'll be the only thing you have to eat? Which, by the way, not a very good plan. If you did that, make sure you have vitamins too. But then you need much more rice. What is the caloric need of each member in your family per day? And here's a handy dandy little calculator from Mayo that will allow you to calculate by your height and your weight and your amount of exercise, how much calories you need each day. Are any of your family members diabetic? Does your family even like rice? All of these things need to be answered to be able to come up with how much rice to store. Basically, I think the best plan is you figure out how long you want for storage, what's the length of time, how many servings of rice that you would want to have for each family member per day, and then do your calculations. There are about 700 calories per cup of uncooked parboiled rice, and there are about 2.5 cups of rice per pound. If you're only existing on rice for 1 year, which not a good plan, and you need 2,000 calories a day, you would need to store 3 cups uncooked rice per day. Well, you do the math here, and that would equal to about 14 5-gallon buckets of rice. But that's an overkill, right? Because you have a lot more things, beans and other things in your food storage. But if you are like me, you do have some buckets, completely filled 5-gallon buckets of rice, and you can get about 30 pounds in a 5-gallon bucket. And I call those my apocalyptic buckets. They're ones I don't touch, and I will only touch if it's a dire situation. So I hope I never have to. And that's not the real way I think you should store your rice. But first, let's talk about shelf life of rice. According to Eat by Date website, for raw rice, white rice lasts for 4 to 5 years in your pantry. Oxygen-free white rice lasts 25 to 30 years. Brown rice, only 6 to 8 months. And minute rice, 4 to 5 years. But you've all heard, right? Rice will keep for 25, 30 years indefinitely. But there's a caveat to that. According to the Utah State University, the best temperature to store grains, including rice, is 40 degrees Fahrenheit or below. However, rice stored at a constant 7 degrees Fahrenheit with oxygen absorbers will store well for up to 10 years. In cooler storage areas, rice sealed in oxygen-free containers can be stored up to 30 years. Okay, for most of us, we don't have those ideal, almost cave-like conditions for our rice. So we may not obtain 25 years or more for our rice that's stored. And your rice could look completely normal, but it's lost nutrition. Now, interestingly enough, both parboiled and white rice that was packed correctly with oxygen absorbers in Mylar bags, there was a study done, and up to 30 years, they had not lost their nutrition. Before we go into one more thing, we need to talk about pests. Rats and mice also love to eat rice. Rats and mice can easily chew through plastic, and rats can even chew through concrete. Most packaging will only be rat resistant, so it's not rat proof. So inspect your long-term pantry often for signs of a rodent infestation. In addition, there's a bug that loves rice. It's called the rice, I always have problems saying that, the rice weevil. Female weevils are only 1/8 of an inch long and use their strong mandibles to chew a hole in a rice kernel and then deposit an egg in that hole, and then it seals the hole with a secretion. One female rice weevil can lay in excess of 300 eggs. And those eggs hatch, and within 2 to 4 days, the larvae come out of the rice grain kernel. It's hollowed out by now because the larvae ate inside of it. And then pretty soon, they're going to be adult weevils. So you can see how easy you could have a infestation that would just ruin your entire rice storage. But the good news is weevils go dormant 60 degrees Fahrenheit or less. So a lot of people put their rice when they buy it in their freezer for 3 days or more. And that will kill the rice bugs and any eggs. But you say, wait a minute, how did eggs get into the rice to begin with? Well, those eggs are microscopic and they can already be in the bag when you buy your rice. So some people use that freezing method. Others say, nah, not a great idea because there could still be some moisture in your rice when you take it out and you store it long term, and that could cause mold and ruin your rice storage. Now, other people use dry ice. You have to be very careful not to have your skin come in contact with the dry ice, or you could experience severe frostbite. And the problem with this method is that sometimes dry ice still has water trapped inside. So when it melts in your bucket, you could have moisture inside. Not a good thing. But if you are interested, the Provident Prepper has an excellent video on this, and I have a link to their video below this video in the description section. Now, if you are freezing your rice, you want to leave it for at least 3 days room temperature after you take it out. So you have time to see if there's any moisture problem before you do long-term storage. Now, some people place chili peppers in their rice or around it. And that's because a chili pepper has a natural biochemical pesticide in it, the capsaicin. So that might help. Others place bay leaves or neem leaves in their rice. And some actually use, and I always have problems pronouncing this, diatomaceous earth, food grade, and sprinkle that on their rice before storage. What do? Well, I do not freeze my rice. I have never had a problem. I mean, let me show you here. Yeah, I repurposed a dry roasted peanut here package. It's really a nice heavy plastic, and I put my rice in here when I buy it. I can keep this on the pantry shelves for 3 to 5 years. It's not even vacuum sealed. I have never had a problem, nor have I had a weevil problem. But if there were weevils in here, at least they'd be caught with this lid. So I don't use the freezing method, but maybe I've just been lucky. But there's one other thing that can kill the weevils or not let them develop, and that is deprive them of oxygen. So that's the reason we use Mylar bags and oxygen absorbers. So that way the weevils cannot develop. And for long-term storage, that's how I do it. Let me show you how I store my rice. Well, you can see I'm using the Wallaby bags again because I really like this. This is the 2-quart size. So it's a nice, portion size. I'm not doing the whole 10 pounds. These are nice bags. They're 5 millimeters thick. I just love Wallaby Mylar bags and oxygen absorbers. It's very quality product. And if you're interested in purchasing some, I have a link down below this video and you can save $5 on your order. Thick. I really like them. And you want to make sure always to label whatever you're doing. And it's easier to label before you fill the bags. So parboiled rice, 223. Just use a Sharpie and that's all there is to it. We're just going to fill up our bag. Shake it a little. I emptied my bag out in here because it's really easier to get into than the bag itself. So I'm going to keep on filling it up. And I shake it every once in a while. You know what? This bag is about right. Okay. There's one. And I'm going to do 2 more bags and I'll be back. Now I'm going to use these 400cc Wallaby oxygen absorbers. There's 10 in a pack and you can see it's still good. 2 and 3. So I'm going to take one bag here and I like to kind of bend it over first, right? I'm going to put it here. And then try to do this with, of course, the camera in the way. But anyway, here we go. Just hold that. And people will ask, what's the setting of the iron? And it's not the steam setting. It is the highest the iron will go. So whatever your iron is set at. Okay. There we go. Nice seal. I'm just going to do the other 2. And yes, you can use one of those hair straighteners, but I just don't have one. And you know what? This works fine for me. But if you got a hair straightener, go ahead and use it. But this little wood block really comes in handy. So here are my bags. Nice and packed. And wasn't that easy? And I've just used my vacuum sealer to reseal the top so I can use these oxygen absorbers in the future. As for the rest of the rice, I just put it in a handy dandy empty Planters dry roasted peanut jar. I'm not using an oxygen absorber because this is going to be something I'm going to use within 3 years probably. And I have purchase date on here and instructions. And then I'm just putting it as tight as I can, but no oxygen absorber, and it'll go on my pantry shelf. Just the way it is. Now, some people store it in a glass canning jar, which is good. Rodents just can't get through that. And they might stick some oxygen absorbers in there, and that works great. Some people use a clean, repurposed 2-liter pop bottle, and that seems to work for them. I used to vacuum pack my rice like this for my 5-year storage, but I don't do that anymore. I found it wasn't necessary. Some people do this, put an oxygen absorber in for long-term rice storage. I don't think that's a good idea. The bag gradually breaks down and oxygen can get back into your rice. Much better putting it in a Mylar bag with an oxygen absorber because that Mylar bag has a metallic coating and it will keep oxygen out. But you might say, well, how do I know how much oxygen absorbers to use? Well, I've got this slide for you. So 100 cc for 1 pint, 200 cc for 1 quart, 300 cc for 2-liter pop bottle, 500 cc for a gallon jug, and 2000 cc for a 5-gallon bucket. Now remember what we said about storage conditions? You want to keep the temperature as low as you can. So try to store it at 70 degrees Fahrenheit or less. And you want it in a low humidity area. And keep it out of light because rice that is exposed to light for too long can discolor. And if you're storing it in a bucket with other foodstuffs, be careful because rice can absorb other smells. Okay, the part you've been waiting for. What's the absolute best way to store rice long term? You may be surprised at my answer. I don't think it's in buckets and I don't think it's in Mylar bags. I think the best way is to have a 5-year supply and just rotate through it. In this case, I'm just repurposing containers. I don't need any special oxygen absorbers or Mylar bags. And this works for me because I continually rotate through it, but I always have a 5-year supply. So this is what I recommend. Instead of trying to reach that 15, 20-year supply without probably having the right conditions at home to really keep it in pristine condition. So do a 5-year plan, a 3-year plan, whatever works for you, and rotate, rotate, rotate. Now, how about those common mistakes I see? Well, rice has another important ingredient to help make it, and that is water. And for 1 cup of rice, you need 2 1/4 cups water. So make sure you have a lot of water in your storage, a source to get clean water from, a water filter, everything you need so you can actually make the rice. You know, I've chewed the hard rice before it's cooked, and believe me, that is not satisfying. So make sure you store enough water. Also, make sure you have a number of different ways to cook that rice if you would lose power, be it solar cooker or your grill or gas cooker, whatever you have. Make sure you have multiple ways to actually cook the rice. Another mistake, people don't check often enough their food preps, their long-term, to see if there are any signs of infestation. Has there been any nibbling on bags or containers? Are there any mice feces on the floor? Always do your due diligence. Next storage mistake, storing your rice like in the attic or another high heat area or high humid area. Not rotating your rice supply. Again, that's the best solution. Not to just stick it in a bucket, you know what I call my apocalyptic buckets, and keep it out of sight and just hope you never need it in 25 years. Rotate your rice storage. And finally, you might all know how to make rice, right, with water, so it's a nice little side dish. But do you know the many, many different ways rice can be used? It can be used for an entree, a side dish, a dessert, even a drink. And it's important to have written recipes with your storage. So check out this video, and it has a handout that will give you some excellent rice storage recipes.